Hi, I'm Ava. I have something I need to say to all of you during the funeral of my late husband, John, who died in an accident. His daughter, Ava, suddenly took to the microphone. The staff and attendees were thrown into confusion. Without caring about their reactions, Ava pointed at me and yelled with a voice filled with loathing. Dad thought of you as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper, and I've never seen you as a mother. Shocked by her sudden outburst, I questioned whether those words truly came from my daughter. My mind replayed her words over and over, yet it seemed to refuse to comprehend them as if it wasn't functioning properly. I wondered if I had done something to make Ava despise me. There had been no indication of such feelings before. Despite not being blood-related, I believed we had been getting along well as a family. As time went by, the initial shock of her words turned into a crushing feeling in my heart. It appeared that her disdain for me had grown to a point where it couldn't be resolved through discussion. Even as Ava continued to belittle me, with staff trying to soothe the situation, she looked down on me, repeating her scornful remarks. Remembering a promise I had made to my husband, I addressed Ava with resolve. Stay strong, no matter what comes. Ava's face turned to one of astonishment at my words. To her puzzled look, I reiterated, no matter what happens, I, Mary, live in an apartment with my daughter and husband, sharing a harmonious life together. Today, being my day off from the part-time job, I decided to spend some quiet time alone at home after finishing the household chores. While sipping coffee on the home sofa, a photo of our family of 3 on a trip caught my eye. This led me to reminisce about when I met John. It has been 7 years since John and I got married. The encounter happened when I was doing outdoor work and dropped some documents, which he helped pick up. Despite others seeing me struggle, he was the first to come over and help, showing concern as we gathered the papers together, a memory I still hold dear. As our companies were close by, we started acknowledging each other on our way back from work or during lunch breaks, gradually leading to conversations. John was older, but an honest adult. His lively, bright, and direct nature made me more attracted to him each time we met. Eventually, we exchanged contact information and started making plans to meet. It was a happy development for me, but there was one concern. John had a child. Sometime after we started seeing each other, he mentioned, I have a child. The child, a girl, was in the upper grades of elementary school. John had been widowed when the child was still young, and he had taken on the responsibility of raising her alone until now. He had been a single father. John expressed his desire to remarry and wanted me to meet his child. Being an only child, I don't have any nieces or nephews, nor do I have young relatives. Thus, I'm pretty clueless about how to interact with children. But, unwilling to give up on the idea of having a family with John, I decided to meet his daughter, Ava. Before our meeting, John shared with me what Ava is like and showed me pictures from a trip they took, featuring Ava with a cute ribbon, smiling alongside John. She looks adorable and very happy, I remarked. She is, but I've been spoiling her a bit too much lately, John confessed. John, feeling sorry for Ava not having a mother, had been indulging her every wish, even if it meant going out of his way to fulfill them. Ava, spoiled by her father, has developed a bit of a willful temperament, sometimes leading to conflicts with friends. While I found their relationship endearing, it did make me wonder if I could really step into the role of a parent given my lack of experience with children. However, I believed that with John by my side, we could overcome any challenge. Seeing John smile with a slightly troubled look helped dispel my lingering doubts. Then, a week later, the day came for me to meet Ava for the first time. The meeting place was the zoo, chosen because it's one of Ava's favorite places. We agreed to meet just before noon, and I arrived 5 minutes early, waiting for them at the entrance. About 15 minutes past our scheduled time, I heard a child's cry from a distance. I saw John running towards me, carrying a girl in his arms. Sorry we're late. It's been quite hot, hasn't it? Are you okay? John apologized, his forehead glistening with sweat. The girl, still crying and wriggling in his arms, was Ava. I wanted to greet her, but her crying was so intense that we decided to calm her down first. Ava, your hat is right here, isn't it? Let's just make do with this one today. No, I wanted the panda hat, Ava protested. Listening to their conversation, it became clear that Ava's preferred hat was unavailable due to laundry issues. John had prepared a different hat, but it seemed Ava wasn't satisfied because it wasn't a panda hat. Because of this, they had argued from the morning, which led to their late arrival at the meeting spot. "Ava, if you want a hat, I'll buy you one from the zoo shop. Let's go inside," I suggested, taking Ava's hand. Though still teary, she stopped crying loudly as I led her by the hand. John looked relieved, and together we entered the zoo. Honestly, Ava did seem quite willful throughout the day. She would throw tantrums when things didn't go her way and sit down, refusing to move until John caved and bought her what she wanted. She cried from the heat and screamed in anger when the animals she wanted to see weren't available. For a grade schooler, this seemed a bit much. Every time Ava acted spoiled, I thought so. But aside from those moments, Ava was a bright and adorable child, much like John. Ava loves pandas, and looking back, her socks and bag were all panda-themed. When we reached the area with her favorite animals, her tears seemed like a distant memory, replaced by smiles and excitement. Pointing at the animals, Ava's childlike joy was infectious. As promised, I bought her a panda hat from a shop inside the zoo, and she immediately put it on, saying, "Thank you," with a bright smile. While not all my worries were gone, that day gave me a glimpse into a future with John and Ava. After our zoo visit, we continued to have meals together about once a week. Gradually, Ava warmed up to me, and when John proposed remarriage, Ava was fully supportive. We eventually got married, and Ava, John, and I became a family of 3. Even after we started living together, Ava's whimsical behavior was noticeable. Ava was particularly picky about food, showing a strong dislike for many things and having a limited diet. Most of the time, she wouldn't eat what I cooked from scratch. John mentioned that they used to rely on frozen meals or eat out before. While occasionally ready meals or dining out is fine, relying on them daily could lead to an unbalanced diet and isn't healthy. I tried my best to finely chop the vegetables Ava disliked, hiding them in dishes to ensure she could still have a balanced diet. Without realizing it, shopping trips with Ava proved to be the most challenging, as she would invariably wander off and become lost or refuse to move unless she got what she wanted. It would be easier if John could accompany us, but when sudden work commitments arose, it was just the 2 of us. Being inexperienced with young children, I initially struggled with how to react or calm her down, but I couldn't simply buy her everything she wanted. We already had plenty of similar items at home. There were times I felt like crying myself when Ava would lie on the floor of the supermarket, crying and screaming because she couldn't get what she wanted. Yet, with love and responsibility, I kept trying to be a good parent to Ava, staying by her side through thick and thin. As Ava grew older, her whimsical behavior lessened, and I felt we were gradually building a good parent-child relationship. Now, I truly consider her my own daughter, and I believe she thinks of me as her parent as well. I wondered how long I had been lost in these thoughts, when the sound of the front door opening and Ava's voice announcing her return snapped me back to reality. "I'm home. I'm starving," she said. Ava had chosen a high school known for its strong job placement program. She dedicated herself to her studies and tennis club, even becoming the captain. As time passed, it soon became the period for deciding on future paths. During dinner, when I casually asked Ava about her plans, she said, "I've decided to get a job." Since becoming a family with Ava, considering the possibility of her going to college in the future, John and I had been saving money and making efforts to economize. So, hearing her decision to work surprised me, to say the least. "Ava, don't you have something you want to do? You can still go to college," I said. I didn't intend to stop her if she wanted to work, but if she was foregoing further education out of consideration for us, we needed to discuss it. "I've decided not to go to college. Dad raised me by himself when I was little, and I want to start giving back as soon as possible to both of you," Ava responded. Her words filled me with joy. It became clear that Ava preferred to become independent sooner rather than later and start contributing to our family. "Thank you, Ava. But don't overburden yourself," I told her. Ava then smiled. We didn't know how John would react to Ava's decision, as he wasn't home from work yet. "I have to go to my part-time job now. Do you want me to bring anything back?" Ava asked. "No, thank you. Be careful on your way," I replied. With a slight nod, Ava left the house. After finishing dinner, I received a call from John asking if I needed anything since he would be coming home late. I was a little worried about how John would react to Ava's decision to work instead of pursuing further education. It was past 11 p.m. when John came home, looking exhausted but still greeted me with a smile. As I handed him dinner and told him about Ava's decision, he furrowed his brow and a serious expression took over his face. But if she wanted to go to college, we could support her with the savings we've accumulated. It's not like she has to work immediately, John said, clearly concerned. Ava wanted to help our family as soon as possible, but as parents, John and I didn't want her to feel burdened or regret not pursuing higher education. We can't just push her into making decisions, I reminded him. We both sat in silence for a while, contemplating our daughter's future. John, we need to support her choice and make sure she feels comfortable discussing her dreams and goals with us, I finally said. John nodded. You're right. We'll talk to her tomorrow. The next day, we sat down with Ava and had a heartfelt conversation about her future. We assured her that no matter what path she chose, we'd always support her. In the end, Ava decided to follow her heart and started working right after graduating from high school. She found a job in a local company, and even though she faced challenges, she showed remarkable dedication and perseverance. Watching Ava grow into a responsible and caring young woman has been one of the most rewarding experiences of our lives. We are immensely proud of her. I couldn't accept the reality and closed my eyes. The only thing that came to mind was John's gentle smile and the image of a young Ava calling me mom for the first time. The first time she called me mom was on the day John and I got married. When we returned home, Ava had been waiting and shyly greeted me with, "Mom, welcome home." Did Ava always despise me? Will she never call me mom again? While I was lost in thought, Ava snatched the microphone back. "I'll inherit everything from Dad, and you, a stranger, won't get anything. And don't you dare show your face in front of me again," she declared. The attendees were either sympathetic towards Ava, thinking she had gone mad from grief, or outraged by the disrespect shown at such an event. Ava was restrained by some attendees and taken to the back of the hall. I had just lost my husband, John, and now it seemed I was losing the daughter I had cherished. Memories of the time spent with John and Ava flooded my mind. The 7 years we had together seemed both long and short now. I had always tried to engage sincerely with Ava, despite not being related by blood, believing we had a bond of affection. Sadly, Ava's heart was no longer with me. Then, remembering something John had told me, I made a decision and stood up to address the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance. I am Mary, John's wife," I began. The noisy hall quieted down as I started to speak. Meanwhile, at the back of the hall, Ava continued to shout, "Cut ties with me! You won't get any inheritance!" while being held back by relatives and staff. "Ava, I understand your point. We'll go our separate ways," I said, and Ava's face brightened a bit. She was getting what she wanted, cutting ties with me, whom she despised, and getting her inheritance. I felt a heaviness in my heart at her reaction. I was still struggling to catch up with my emotions. Is the pain of being rejected by one's daughter this harsh? Stay strong no matter what happens. After saying that, I apologized again to the attendees for causing a disturbance and proceeded with the intended speech. Ava was taken outside by the staff, deemed needing to calm down. I glimpsed her from the corner of my eye. The ceremony continued without further issues, and I apologized to each staff member and attendee after it ended. I haven't been in contact with Ava since then. I haven't reached out, but somewhere in my heart, I was sure we would meet again. Months have passed since my husband's funeral. I have completed all the necessary procedures as his surviving spouse and have been getting by. I'm still not over the grief, but staying alone at home makes it worse, so I'm gradually returning to my part-time job. Ava, it seemed, took her belongings while I was out, as her clothes and shoes disappeared one day. I haven't been able to bring myself to clear away my husband's chopsticks and plates. I spend my days in a room filled with his remnants. Today, after finishing my 4-hour part-time job, I returned to my apartment. To my surprise, there was Ava, whom I hadn't seen in a while, standing at the entrance. Noticing me, Ava approached quickly and started to confront me with, This isn't what we agreed on. She seemed frantic. I gently pushed her shoulder, suggesting we go inside to avoid causing a disturbance to the neighbors. Ava entered the house, complaining. Once the door was closed, she approached me again. The inheritance from Dad hasn't come through. What's going on? It appeared she was panicked because the inheritance hadn't reached her yet. Ava, you're not John's biological child. My words left Ava in shock. In fact, Ava was the child of John's previous wife, not related by blood. When John introduced his child to me, I was informed of this fact, but respecting John's wishes not to hurt Ava and considering her his precious daughter regardless of blood, I had kept silent about this. So, I have a real dad somewhere else? No, your mom was unmarried when she had you, and married John shortly after, so legally you have no father listed. John did not legally adopt Ava even after taking her in by himself. He thought it would be unfair to burden Ava with potential caregiving responsibilities if he became ill, as they would be legally recognized as parent and child. Shocked by this sudden revelation, Ava was very disturbed. So, who can inherit then? Ava looked at me incredulously, and the moment she realized I would inherit, she quickly changed her attitude towards me. Come to think of it, Mom, it must be hard on your own, right? I can come back and help take care of you. I stepped back from Ava, who was trying to cozy up to me. Weren't you the one who said we were no longer related? That was your own words, wasn't it? I said with a cold voice, and she visibly paled, then clung to my feet. No, that's not. I didn't mean what I said back then. She tried to dismiss it, but to me, it seemed like her true feelings. Then, in a panic, she came up with another proposal. So, can't you just share a little bit of the inheritance with me? I kind of overspent. I need money. Ava's breathing was rough, and despite the temperature not being particularly high, she was sweating. It was clear her mind was in turmoil. Having quit her job and not sought reemployment and expecting the inheritance had led her to spend recklessly, leaving her virtually penniless. But I couldn't bring myself to want to help her. I remembered a request John had made during his lifetime. That was when Ava was still working, and by chance John and I had the same day off and went out for lunch together for the first time in a while. It was an Italian restaurant we often visited before we were married, a place full of memories for the two of us. Since Ava was picky with food, it had been a long time since we last visited the restaurant. We were seated at a table with a view of the outdoors. The interior hadn't changed much, but the menu seemed to have undergone some updates. However, the set meals John and I always ordered were still there, which made us happy. I ordered pasta, and John ordered pizza. Once our orders arrived, my husband and I shared our dishes as we ate. After the meal, we enjoyed coffee while watching people pass by outside. Looking up, the sky was clear and blue, and though the window wasn't open, I felt a sense of freedom. Then John, sitting across from me, started a conversation. It's been a while, but this place is as good as ever, he said. Yes, they even have new dishes that Ava might like. We should come back here together next time, I replied. John nodded happily at my suggestion. I'm really grateful for how well you get along with Ava. She can be willful, but she's my precious daughter, he said. I agreed with him. The more I observed them, the clearer it became how dearly John cherished Ava. His love transcended even the bonds of blood, a trait I always found admirable in John. We never know what the future holds. If something happens to me, please look after Ava, he formally requested. Feeling a strange discomfort at his request, I asked, What brought this on? You're not sick, are you? I wondered if he had been diagnosed with an illness, but it seemed that wasn't the case. Just looking at Mary made me want to say it, he said with a gentle smile. Of course, I'll raise Ava to be a fine adult, even on my own. Don't worry, I assured him. John thanked me, then his expression turned serious. But if Ava ever looks down on you, or becomes the kind of adult you can't forgive, I want you to be unforgiving and strict with her, he said. That must have been John's way of showing love and resolve as a parent. I didn't want such a situation to arise, but I nodded in agreement to John's words. I brought my thoughts back from the memories, looking at Ava, who was still clinging to my leg. Ava had tears in her eyes, persistently begging, I want you to share some money with me. Despite her claims at the funeral that John only saw me as a housekeeper, I couldn't feel that way. There was an unshakable love between John and me, something Ava probably never realized. "Hey, are you listening? You're going to share the money, right? I was Dad's daughter too," she said, trying to rise by holding on to my leg. I moved my leg away, shaking her off. "I told you, didn't I? To live strongly, no matter what happens." "No matter what," I emphasized, then forcefully made her stand up. Ava looked at me, stunned, but I pulled her by the arm, pushing her outside the door. Then I placed 4 paper bags filled with her belongings in front of the bewildered Ava. Caught off guard by being put out, she stared at me blankly, but I closed the door firmly without looking back. Half a year has passed since then. At first, Ava came to my house a few times, but I completely ignored her. Angered by being ignored, Ava began engaging in harassing behaviors, like leaving trash in front of my house or sending mail demanding attention. When I happened to witness one of her harassment attempts, she tried to explain away her actions in a panic. Disgusted, I told her, "If you do this again, I'll report you to the police." Perhaps accepting defeat, Ava eventually stopped coming by. I heard from John's relatives that Ava was struggling financially, even resorting to debt. The inheritance came into my possession, and I have enough money, but I haven't quit my part-time job. I plan to use the money John left me only if necessary, without spending a dollar of it yet. I'm not living a life of luxury, but it has been enough for me. I hope to lead a peaceful life, cherishing the memories I had with John.
My name is Lillian, and for 30 years, I lived what I thought was a perfect life. Our big house just outside the city limits was my haven, a place where happiness seemed to bloom endlessly. My husband, Tom, was my rock. Our son, Jake, was the light of our lives, a budding football star at his college. I remember the day Jake brought home Sarah, his girlfriend. She was a sweet girl with a gentle smile and kind eyes. I took to her immediately, seeing in her the daughter I never had. They'd come over often, filling our house with youthful laughter and dreams of the future. As I watched them, I couldn't help but think about wedding bells and their future. They seemed so perfect together, so in sync. I'd already started thinking of Sarah as part of our family. As the days passed, I noticed Jake becoming increasingly excited about something. He'd burst into the house after practice, practically vibrating with energy. At first, I chalked it up to his passion for football and his relationship with Sarah. But there was something different about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Jake bounded into the kitchen, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Mom, guess what? I'm going to a competition in the neighboring state." I turned from the stove, smiling at his excitement. "That's wonderful, honey. When is it?" "We leave next week," he replied, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl. "It's a big deal, Mom. Could be a real game changer for my career." Something about his demeanor struck me as odd. Jake had been to many competitions before, but he'd never been quite this keyed up about one. "Are you okay, Jake?" I asked, studying his face. "You seem different." He waved off my concern with a laugh. "I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine. You don't need to worry about me. This is just a really important opportunity, that's all." I nodded, not entirely convinced, but willing to let it go. "All right, sweetie. Just remember, you can always talk to me if something's on your mind." 3 long months passed, and Jake was still gone. At first, I wasn't too concerned. These competitions could sometimes run longer than expected, especially if the team was doing well. I called him regularly, and each time, he assured me everything was fine. "The competition's just lasting longer than we thought, Mom," he'd say. "Don't worry about me." I believed him. After all, Jake had never lied to me before. Why would he start now? Still, as the weeks dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. One evening, as Tom and I sat on the porch, I voiced my concerns. "Don't you think it's odd that Jake's been gone so long? Tom sipped his coffee thoughtfully. It is unusual, but if he says everything's okay, we should trust him. He's a grown man now, Lil. Finally, after 3 months, Jake returned. But the bombshell he dropped on us was nothing I could have prepared for. Mom, Dad, he announced one evening. I've decided I want to live separately. I'm going to rent an apartment. I exchanged a surprised look with Tom. This was unexpected, but not entirely unreasonable. Jake was an adult, after all. If that's what you want, son, Tom said, we support your decision. I nodded in agreement, albeit with a hint of sadness. Our baby was really growing up. Just know you're always welcome here, Jake. Over the next few weeks, Jake rarely visited. Instead, he'd send messages, often asking for money. Each time, I'd transfer the funds, hoping it would help him become more independent. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something had changed in our relationship. Then came the phone call that would turn our world upside down. Mom, Jake's voice crackled over the line, I'm coming over tonight. I've got some important news to share. And, I won't be alone. My heart leaped with excitement. Could it be? Were Jake and Sarah finally taking the next step? That's wonderful, honey, I exclaimed. I'll cook up a special dinner for us all. As I hung up the phone, I turned to Tom with a wide grin. I think our boy's finally going to make it official with Sarah. Tom chuckled, pulling me into a hug. Well, it's about time. They make a great couple. I spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, preparing Jake's favorite dishes and setting the table with our best china. This was a momentous occasion, and I wanted everything to be perfect. As evening fell, I heard a car pull up in the driveway. My heart raced with anticipation as I smoothed down my dress and went to open the door. But the sight that greeted me was nothing like what I had expected. Jake stood there, all right, but the woman by his side wasn't Sarah. This girl was a stranger, strikingly beautiful, dressed in bright, provocative clothing that seemed out of place for a family dinner. Mom, Jake said, his voice oddly flat, I'd like you to meet Veronica, my wife. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of cruel joke. But the defiant look in Jake's eyes and the smug smile on Veronica's face told me it was all too real. We all moved to the dining room in a daze. As we sat down at the table I'd so carefully prepared, I couldn't stop staring at Veronica. She was beautiful, yes, but there was something cold in her eyes that made me uneasy. Jake, seeming oblivious to the tension, launched into a description of their wedding. We had an amazing ceremony at that new upscale venue downtown. You should have seen it, Mom. The flowers, the music, everything was perfect. Each word felt like a knife twisting in my heart. How could you celebrate your wedding without the people closest to you? I asked, fighting back tears. Jake's face hardened. The closest person to me is my wife, he declared. I want to make her happy. Veronica raised her head, a smug smile playing on her lips. Jake continued, his voice softening slightly. Veronica's parents abandoned her years ago. Her grandmother raised her, but she passed away recently. I didn't want Veronica to feel lonely at our wedding, so we decided not to invite any relatives. We celebrated with just our friends. I sat there, trying to process this information. Then a thought struck me. Jake, what about Sarah? What happened with her? Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I left her, he mumbled. She cheated on me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sweet, kind Sarah, cheating? It didn't make any sense. Trying to understand more about this woman who had suddenly become part of our family, I turned to Veronica. So, Veronica, I began, attempting to keep my voice steady, where are you from originally? Veronica's eyes narrowed slightly, but she remained silent. Undeterred, I pressed on. What do you do for a living? Are you working somewhere at the moment? Again, Veronica avoided answering, her lips pressed into a thin line. Perhaps you could tell us a bit about your interests? What do you like to do in your free time? I tried once more, desperation creeping into my voice. At this, Veronica abruptly stood up. "I'm not obliged to discuss my personal life with outsiders," she announced haughtily. "We're leaving." Without so much as a thank you for the dinner, she strode towards the door. Jake jumped up to follow her, pausing only to ask me to pack some food for them and transfer money for their honeymoon. As the door slammed behind them, Tom and I sat in stunned silence. The next day, still reeling from the previous night's events, I decided to call Jake. I needed answers, needed to understand what was going on. But when the call connected, it wasn't Jake's voice I heard. "Jake's busy right now," Veronica's cold voice came through the speaker. "He can't talk. But you can send money for our honeymoon to his card. We have nothing else to discuss with you." The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, shock giving way to a deep, aching sadness. What had happened to my sweet boy? And how had this woman gained such control over him? With a heavy heart, I transferred several $1,000s to Jake's account. It was all I could do, the only way I could still feel connected to my son. Weeks passed, and life settled into an uneasy rhythm. Tom and I tried to come to terms with Jake's sudden marriage, but the silence from our son was deafening. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Jake. "Mom," he said, his voice brimming with excitement. "I've got amazing news. Veronica's pregnant. We're going to have a baby." My heart leaped. A grandchild. Despite everything, joy surged through me. "Oh, Jake, that's wonderful news." "Yeah, it's great," he continued, his tone shifting slightly. "But, we need some help. Preparing for a baby is expensive, you know?" I transferred a substantial amount to Jake's account, my heart full of hope. Maybe this baby would bring our family back together. A few weeks later, I was tidying up the living room when I heard a car pull up. To my surprise, Jake and Veronica burst through the front door without knocking. Veronica strode past me, her eyes scanning every corner of our home. "This house will do nicely," she declared, her tone matter of fact. "I'm sorry, what?" I stammered, confused. Jake stepped forward, his face set in determination. "Mom, we've decided that we're going to live here. You and Dad need to find somewhere else to stay." I felt as if I'd been slapped. "What are you talking about? This is our home." Veronica turned to me, her eyes cold. "For the proper development of our child, we need freedom and space. This house is perfect." Anger bubbled up inside me. "Absolutely not. This is our home, and you can't just demand we leave." Veronica's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Fine. But you can forget about having any relationship with your son or your future grandchild." Before I could respond, they turned and stormed out, leaving me standing in shock. From that day on, my phone was flooded with messages from Jake. Each one demanded we give them the house, each one more insulting and threatening than the last. I couldn't believe the cruel words coming from my son. What had happened to him? 2 weeks of this torment passed, before Jake showed up at our door again. His face was contorted with rage. "You need to give us this house," he shouted. "Veronica's threatening to divorce me if you don't. Do you want to ruin my marriage?" I tried to reason with him. "Jake, honey, can't you see? She's blackmailing you. This isn't right." His face turned an alarming shade of red. "Don't you dare talk about Veronica like that. You're not worth a hair on her head." That was the final straw for Tom. Without a word, he grabbed Jake by the arm and forcefully escorted him out the door, slamming it behind him. As Jake's angry shouts faded, I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face. Tom knelt beside me, wrapping his arms around me. Weeks passed, and life settled into an uneasy rhythm. Tom and I tried to process the drastic changes in our son's behavior, but the pain and confusion lingered. One day, while shopping for groceries, I heard a familiar voice call out my name. "Lillian?" I turned to see Sarah, Jake's ex-fiancée, standing by the produce section. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed her heavily pregnant belly. Memories of Jake's accusations about her cheating flooded back, and I found myself at a loss for words. Gathering my composure, I managed a smile. "Sarah, I had no idea you were expecting. How are you feeling?" Sarah's eyes welled up with tears. It's not easy," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Being pregnant and abandoned, it's been tough." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. Abandoned? That didn't align with Jake's story at all. Sensing there was more to this situation, I gently probed for details. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. Can you tell me what happened?" "Jake told us, well, he said you had cheated on him." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Cheated? Lillian, no. That's not what happened at all." Over the next half hour, as we stood in the quiet corner of the grocery store, Sarah revealed the truth that shattered my world. "Jake didn't go to any sports competition," she explained, her voice trembling. "He met a girl online and went to meet her in another state. He was gone for 3 months, remember?" I nodded, the pieces starting to fall into place. Sarah continued. "When I found out I was pregnant, I called Jake to tell him the news. But he told me he had married someone else. He refused to have anything to do with the baby." My legs felt weak. I leaned against the shopping cart for support, trying to process this information. Our Jake, our sweet boy, had lied to us all. He had abandoned Sarah and their unborn child for a woman he barely knew. We parted ways with promises to stay in touch, and I headed home in a daze. My mind was reeling from the revelations. Jake's story about the extended competition, his sudden marriage to Veronica, his cruel treatment of us, it all made a twisted kind of sense now. As I walked through our front door, Tom took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "Lil, what happened?" he asked, concern etched on his features. I sank into a chair at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on me. "Tom, sit down," I said. "There's something you need to know about Jake." As I recounted my conversation with Sarah, I watched the color drain from Tom's face. Our son had lied to us, abandoned his pregnant fiancée, and married a virtual stranger. In the days following my encounter with Sarah, Tom and I had many long, difficult conversations. We both felt a deep sense of responsibility towards Sarah and her unborn child, our grandchild. "We need to help her, Tom," I said one evening. "She shouldn't have to go through this alone." Tom nodded in agreement. "You're right. Let's reach out to her." When we approached Sarah with our offer of support, she initially refused, her pride and hurt evident in her eyes. But as the weeks passed and we gently persisted, she eventually accepted our help. I began to see her often, accompanying her to doctor's appointments, helping her prepare for the baby's arrival, and simply being there as a shoulder to cry on. One evening, as I returned home from helping Sarah set up the nursery, Tom met me with a serious expression. "Lil, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice grave. "I hired a private detective." I stared at him in shock. "You did what?" Tom sighed heavily. "I needed to know what was really going on with Jake. The detective's report came in today, and Lil, it's worse than we thought." Over the next hour, Tom revealed the detective's findings. Jake had dropped out of college, abandoning his sports career and education to get a job supporting Veronica's extravagant spending habits. The detective had overheard a conversation between Jake and Veronica, where they coldly discussed plans to force us out of our home and claim it for themselves. But the most shocking revelation was about Veronica's past. She had a history of pursuing wealthy men for their money. The detective discovered that Veronica had become pregnant by one of these men and had manipulated Jake into marriage by claiming the child was his. I stood up, my mind racing. "We have to tell Jake. We have to make him see what's happening." But Tom shook his head sadly. "Lil, he won't believe us. You've seen how he is now. If we try to tell him, he'll only push us further away." As much as it pained me, I knew Tom was right. Jake was so under Veronica's influence that any attempt to reveal the truth would likely backfire. "What do we do, then?" I asked, feeling helpless. Tom took my hand in his. For now, we focus on Sarah and the baby. They're the ones who truly need us right now. I nodded, fighting back tears. You're right. Sarah needs us, and that baby, our grandchild, they're innocent in all of this. As we sat there, processing all we had learned, I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger, sadness, and fear for Jake. But I also felt a renewed sense of purpose. We might not be able to help Jake right now, but we could be there for Sarah and her baby. And maybe, just maybe, by showing Jake what real love and support looked like, we could eventually break through to him. Just when Tom and I thought things couldn't get any worse, we woke up one morning to find our house defaced with cruel, insulting graffiti. Greedy oldsters, selfish bastards, and other hurtful words were spray-painted across our walls in angry red letters. Shocked and hurt, we immediately called our neighbor across the street, who had outdoor security cameras. We watched the footage with heavy hearts, witnessing our own son vandalizing our home in the dead of night. The sight of Jake, sneaking around like a common criminal, left us speechless. We didn't confront Jake about the graffiti. Instead, we quietly painted over the hateful words and put our house on the market. Within weeks, we had sold our longtime home and purchased a new one, not far from where Sarah lived with her newborn son, our grandson. The day Sarah brought little Thomas home from the hospital was bittersweet. As I held that tiny bundle in my arms, my heart swelled with love and broke simultaneously. This was my grandson, Jake's son, yet Jake wanted nothing to do with him. Weeks passed, and we settled into our new life. Then, out of the blue, my phone rang. It was Jake, calling from an unfamiliar number. "Mom," he shouted, his voice filled with rage. "What the hell is going on?" I went to the house and there are strangers living there. They threatened to call the cops on me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Why did you go there, Jake? To vandalize our home again?" There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. "That's right," I continued, my voice steady. "We know it was you. We sold the house, Jake. And we've cut you out of our lives." Jake's shock quickly turned to anger. "You can't do this to me," he yelled. "Veronica might leave me because of you. I'll never see my son." I couldn't help but laugh, a sad, hollow sound. "Oh, Jake. That child isn't yours. Veronica lied to you." "What are you talking about?" he sputtered. "We hired a private investigator, Jake. We know everything. About Veronica's past, about her lying about your paternity, about your plans to take our house. I'm sending you the evidence now." As I hit send on the email containing the detective's report, I heard Jake's sharp intake of breath. "You're a fool, Jake," I said, my voice softening slightly. "You abandoned Sarah and your real son for a woman who's been lying to you from the start. I hope one day you'll realize what you've thrown away." With that, I hung up the phone, my hand shaking slightly. 6 months passed in a blur of baby giggles, sleepless nights, and newfound joy. Tom and I had settled into our roles as doting grandparents, cherishing every moment with little Thomas. Our new home, though smaller, was filled with more love and laughter than we'd experienced in years. One sunny afternoon, as we sat on our porch watching Sarah push Thomas on the swing we'd installed in the backyard, our neighbor walked by with some surprising news. "Did you hear about Jake?" she asked, her voice low. "Word is, that wife of his up and left him. Apparently, she handed their child over to her parents, turns out she wasn't an orphan after all, and ran off with some wealthy man she met." Tom and I exchanged glances, a mix of emotions washing over us. Despite everything, a part of me still ached for the pain Jake must be going through. Later that evening, as if summoned by our thoughts, Jake called. His voice was a far cry from the angry, demanding tone we'd grown accustomed to. Instead, he sounded broken, desperate. "Mom," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry. For everything. Please, can we start over? I know I'm still your sole heir. I can change, I promise." I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar ache in my chest. "Oh, Jake," I said softly. "I'm sorry you're hurting." But you need to know, your father and I have changed our will. Everything we have will go to Thomas, your son, the one you abandoned." Jake's sobs turned to shouts. "No. You can't do that. I'll go back to Sarah, we can start over." "Goodbye, Jake," I said firmly, and ended the call. Tom found me on the porch swing a little while later, staring out at the setting sun. He sat beside me, taking my hand in his. "You okay?" he asked gently. I nodded, squeezing his hand. "I am. It's not the ending I would have chosen for us, but I think we're exactly where we're meant to be." And we were. Our new life, though different from what we'd imagined, was filled with purpose and love. Every weekend, our home was filled with the joyous sounds of Thomas's laughter as he explored every nook and cranny. Sarah, once just our son's girlfriend, had become the daughter we never had. "Grandma, Grandpa." Thomas's little voice called out one Sunday afternoon. "Look what I can do." We watched in delight as he took his first wobbly steps across the living room, collapsing into Sarah's waiting arms. Sarah looked up at us, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "I don't know what I would have done without you two," she said softly. "You've been more like parents to me than I ever expected to have." I knelt down beside her, wrapping them both in a hug. "Oh, sweetheart. You and Thomas, you're our family. We couldn't love you more if we tried." As I looked around at the faces of my family, Tom's weathered smile, Sarah's gentle eyes, Thomas's chubby cheeks, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. This was not the life I had planned, but it was a life filled with more love, more joy, and more purpose than I could have ever imagined.